Uh, Excited to speak to you today. As Sharon said, my name is Derek Nener-Plante. I am the owner or principal of my company, DNP Infrastructure, and I'm happy to. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to teach some of this and be with you today, and for the really lucky ones of you, tomorrow as well, for today for your asphalt pavement inspection renewal course. And again, thanks to Sharon, Jen, and Mike as well, who have been working with me to try and make sure that I'm covering the topics that they thought was important for this class. So before I get going, a little bit about me, as I think it's important for you to know the qualifications of anyone that's trying to teach to you. So I've been working in asphalt pavements since my sophomore year of college. My asphalt origin story, as I believe a lot of us have an asphalt origin story, is that I was going to civil engineering school. I got an internship where I grew up outside Boston to work for Mass Highway, Mass DOT, and they just placed me in their pavement unit. And for whatever reason, I was hooked on this topic, thought it was interesting. Maybe that makes me weird, probably definitely does. But I've been doing it ever since. Ever since that, I got my master's degree in asphalt engineering. After that, I worked briefly for a company doing ground penetrating radar. And after that, I joined the Maine Department of Transportation. There, I worked briefly out as an inspector. All right. And then once they realized I actually liked asphalt, I worked up and became the asphalt pavement engineer responsible for all things asphalt for the state of Maine. And so did that for about 10 years. I was responsible from everything from writing the specifications to managing the quality assurance program when it came to asphalt, troubleshooting issues. Generally, if I showed up on a job, things weren't going well. That's where a lot of my asphalt pictures aren't good, because I was only called when things weren't going well out in the field. So I did that for nearly 10 years. Then I joined Federal Highway Administration and and I did that for 5 years, being kind of an asphalt pavement subject matter expert for the country, helping people with issues they may have with asphalt. And so that is how I came to visit North Dakota for the first few times, speak at the conference that Sharon talked about, and maybe even meet a couple of you while I was up there. So since that, last year I left Federal Highway Administration and kind of started my own thing. So happy to speak to you today. Again, I'll say that being in Maine today, I think you guys are, I just checked, you guys are warmer than where I am by 2 degrees, but we're in the same boat. We have basically the same weather for the next week. I'm about sick of it and I'm ready for spring. I don't know about if you are, and get ready back out into the field, but something other than cold and snow would be appreciated. I'm about done. So, what I'd like to do is make this as engaging as possible for you. I understand that virtual training can be very tough. All right, especially for those of you that have the 30 years experience doing this, or even those doing it 10, that's a long time, right? But I do like to harp on some basics and get into kind of the reminders of what are the big levers for getting quality asphalt pavement out in the field. And my biggest thing I'd like to get into is the importance of your job. Whatever you're doing out there with your inspector, I know we have some people from the contractor doing quality control, but your job is irreplaceable out there, in my opinion. And the things that you're responsible for and do are critical to getting quality, which is what we all want. And so that's what I'd really like to harp on, is the importance of the role of an inspector out in the field, and some reminders there. So with that, as Sharon said, feel free to come off mute and ask questions if you have them, or add them in the chat if you're more comfortable with that. I'll look at that as I'm going on, but I'm hoping to make this as engaging as possible. I do throw in a joke here and there. My apologies if they stink. So I'll ask this rhetorically, because generally my second slide, people aren't going to come off mute or add a lot. But if you feel like putting in the chat at the very least, why are you here today? Right? all the way from maybe the snarkiest answer to maybe the more real answer. Why are you here? Especially if you've been here for 30 years, you've been doing this type of job for 30 years. Why do we have certification? Why do we have certification where we don't train you just once? We want you to come in every once in a while and hear maybe some of the same things. Any thoughts? It's not because you love asphalt, Dustin. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you don't have that love in your heart for it. Sharon said I have to. I was waiting for that one, right? Someone said I have to be here, right? Okay. Again, I understand that's probably the reason, but Roger gets on something that's important. Number one, specifications do change. A lot of asphalt paving hasn't changed in 30 years. A lot of it actually has. All right, specs change, but review is also great. Okay, I have younger kids. All right, so I'll give a couple examples there. How many times have I taught them the same thing, right? And then, oh, I forgot, or whatever. Especially, we find that if we do the same thing over and over and over, sometimes we get a little comfortable with it. We may still be very good at it, but at times we could get a little too comfortable with it. So these reminders are good. A big reason why we do certification is because, again, your job matters. And if your job matters and what you do matters, then we don't just train you once and then assume that you've never forgotten anything in your life, right? We want to check in periodically to ensure that everyone is on the same page. Because if we don't do that, what we find and the reason why we have these certification programs that you come in every couple of years and hear maybe a lot of the same thing is that over time, people start to drift apart. We're all on the same page. And if we never check back in, we drift apart over time. I see this largely for those that are in labs. And I understand primarily you are all out in the field. But if you're in a lab, and you don't check in on these things over time, you start to kind of get these habits that drift away from maybe what other people are doing. So there is a purpose to be here. We have to be here, again, because Sharon said I have to. All right, so let's make it as worth it as we can. So I do have some learning objectives based upon my discussion with the group and what are some key items for this audience that I hope you walk away with at the end of today's session. Number one, I want you to understand what is the role of quality assurance. Why do we do these things? And how do you fit in as an inspector of some sort? Whether, again, you're on the owner side or the contractor side. That's what I want to do first. Then I want to understand the best practices of preparing a good paving site, placement, compacting, all those things that we want out of a good asphalt mixture placement. All right. What are some of our common issues in TAC, segregation, placement, and compaction? Those big things, the things that we run into as issues most commonly. If I miss some, let's talk about them. If there's others that you see, let's talk about them. All right. I'd like you to understand, and I was asked to understand what changes you could anticipate with polymer modified mixes, understanding that North Dakota is using more polymer modified mixes and that is expanding. All right. So what can you expect from that from a field standpoint? Not necessarily from a mixture production standpoint, but from a field standpoint, what could you see with that? It's relatively limited, but there are some things that you should be aware of. And then again, some just reminders about inspection. All right. And the role of what you're doing out there. And I'll talk about observing, documenting, communicating. All right. As the big thing that we're looking for any inspector. I don't care what you're looking at, even if you're looking at something like concrete. I did notice Sharon's slide earlier. The first slide said concrete pavement. Nearly choked, thinking about having to talk about concrete pavement. All right. But again, no matter what you're inspecting, some of these things will apply. So start with role of inspectors, or what is this whole quality assurance? Why do we have to test? Why do we have to inspect? Why do we have to do all this? All right. And I think this is important because for many of you, especially those of you that answered maybe 12 years, 10 years, you haven't been around long enough to think about what these specifications or systems were like before we did it this way. All right. So quality assurance or having inspection, all of this is around for good reason. If we go back in history, a lot of the interstate system was built under method specifications. So what that means is that the agency, the owner, DOT, whoever it is, told the contractor exactly what to do. All right. Every step of the way. Pretty much ran the contractor's plans, told them, okay, turn the wheel, I want to do this, right? Did everything, but essentially what I think of is they were really renting the equipment and the people to run it. They were making all the decisions, right? And what was found is that wasn't really the most effective way to do this, right? It didn't really balance risk between the owner, the agency, and the contractor, right? If the owner said do X, Y, Z, all right, and it resulted in a bad pavement, right? The owner owned it at that point. I told the contractor what to do. You can't hold the contractor responsible if you told them what to do and then you don't like the outcome, right? And a lot of that was kind of happening. The other thing we have to acknowledge is that owners, agencies, lost a lot of people. They used to have the people to run those jobs. We were talking a little bit earlier. We now rely as an industry a lot on consultants, right? And stuff like that. And agencies don't have the manpower to do all of this a lot of times. All right. So we have moved away from method specifications to letting the contractor run their own operation. Tell the contractor as much as I can what the end result that I want. I want this mixture to be of this quality, etc. How they get there, as much as you can, leave it up to the contractor to figure that out. Okay. And that's where we get today's modern quality assurance programs, where we have a couple different goals. Right? We want to give contractors control and allow them innovation where they can to meet some project requirements as much as possible, depending on the material, what matters, and we'll talk about that. Right? What the owner's job, all right, what the owner's job, if you will, DOT or consultants, if you work for DOT or an owner, right, your job is to see, does this material meet spec, right? Does it meet my requirements? And therefore the specs are going to tell me how much I pay for it, right? That's your job. Not necessarily how they get there, all right? Depending on the material, those are details, all right? But the owner wants to figure out what is the level of quality? Let's maybe incentivize higher quality. What do I have to reject? Unfortunately, happens, right? And then how much am I going to pay for it? Okay. The other thing that good quality assurance programs do these days is look at variability in the product, right? You all are inspectors out in the field. It's not the same every single day. There is variability in what we do. And that is the role of quality assurance, all right, is to look at these things, right, and serve a purpose, right? The thing that I think that sometimes we lose with quality assurance, and these are things that we kind of glorify the olden days. We had a lot of issues with construction before quality assurance. We had a lot of failing material that was paid for. We had a lot of issues with long-term quality, right? Because it was pass fail, right? Oh, it's either passes or it fails. And gee, it passed an awful lot. That's why we have inspection and testing and all of that with a quality assurance program. And you'll notice that personnel qualification and certification, having people that know what they're doing, is part of that, right? And that's why part of the reason you're here today. And what I like to note is that, inspectors, quality assurance, acceptance, quality control, all of those items, all right, are not just for the highway industry. They're not just for DOT jobs, all right? Quality assurance is widespread around the world in almost every single industry. It's not something that we dreamed up or Federal Highway dreamed up or DOT's dreamed up. All right, I snapped this picture. This is Ben and Jerry's. If you know Ben and Jerry's ice cream, on a visit to Vermont, they have their quality assurance lab in there for testing the ice cream. All right. Any manufacturing process has quality assurance, healthcare, software development, making cars, construction, others, right? Nearly every industry has a version of what you do and what the testers and all of that do. What makes us different, and I think this is important to think about why we do some of the things that we do, is that our construction industry, whether it's concrete, whether it's asphalt, whatever it is, our paving industry is different in two major ways. All right. And I'm the more I think about this, I'm thinking about a third that I'll add. Number one, we have higher variability in the materials that we use. When I talk to my kids, paving is taking rocks out of the ground, all right, mixing it with this black sticky stuff, all right, and I joke with them that it comes from dead dinosaurs. Not really, but I think it's funner to think about asphalt as dead dinosaurs, all right. Mix it together in this big hot mixing place and smear it all over the ground, all right. Explaining that to a 6-year-old, it isn't too far off from what we're actually doing. The rocks in the ground are not all the same. I don't have to tell you in North Dakota because you don't have a lot of pictures like this of ledge sources, right? You use a lot of naturally occurring aggregate sand sources, gravels, and that is variable. It has variable. If we show that what's the difference between how we do it and some of these, think about the manufacturing of a computer or even a car. Their tolerances are this much. They don't accept failure, right? And that leads to the second bullet in what makes us different. We have a much higher tolerance of accepting material that doesn't meet specs as a result of that variability, right? I'm curious if you do know, bonus point in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, if you know the typical for people that use, acceptance specifications and how we kind of pay for things, especially for those that use specs like percent within limits. What percent of failing material generally in the paving industry do we accept and still pay full price, right? So what percentage of failing material are we okay with as an industry and generally pay full price, knowing that some of it failed? If there's any guesses or people that may know, throw it in the chat. I'll wait on that for a second. But what I'm going to give you as my comparison point is if you look at some of these other industries, manufacturing, automotives, etc., their acceptance of failing material, of stuff that doesn't meet spec, is 0.00001%, right? Sometimes you've heard the phrase Six Sigma or something like that. That's what that's talking about. So they're talking about 0.501%. Okay, that's what, if you're making an automotive part, if you tell Toyota or Ford you want to make a part for them, you got to show that you have failures less than that, right? So I have guests from Dan, Jeff, 15, 2%, 10%, 10%. Most pay equations are somewhere in that 10, maybe 5, depending on where it is, 10 to 5% failing material, and you still get full pay. That's kind of a general principle in that range. These other industries look at us like we are nuts for the amount of failing material we have. And a lot of it is because we have variability. And then once you put a road down, once you pave, it's a real pain to redo it, right? I got to remove it and replace it. If I'm just making automotive parts, I just throw that part away, right? I just throw it away, especially if it doesn't happen a lot. But because of how often it happens, because of the variability we have to deal with, and the implications for removing it, we have that higher tolerance, okay? These are the reasons why we are treated a little bit different. The last thing I'll say that makes us different, and this speaks primarily to this audience and the role that you play. On asphalt pavement, you cannot tell everything you need to know about the quality of its construction by looking at it after it's paved. The material doesn't allow us, and we'll talk about the reasons why. That's why we have this course, right? Part of the reason we have this course is how it is paved impacts quality, right? Other materials don't necessarily have that same issue. Again, if I go back to manufacturing, there's many products that I can just give you the end product and you can test it, evaluate it, and see whether it works. I can't show up to an asphalt that was paved a week ago and figure out everything I need to know about how it's going to perform. It's a complicated material. That's why we like to have inspectors on site, right? Because how it's built matters. We can't just do an end result and say, I looked at it, I got my calibrated eye, looks great. Okay. That's what makes us different. I know I'm beating this to death, but I think it's important to take the big view of the big role that you play in this entire process. And so inspection is critical to assess a number of things. And I generally break it to these three things. The reason why inspection has to be there, right? Number one, right? And I'll actually go in a little bit out of order. People think of the quality of the product, right? The quality of the asphalt pavement. Certainly, as an inspector, that's why you're there. Okay, the product itself, so the pavement that's going down, but also the quality of the process. We're going to highlight a number of things that the process matters when you think about it and think about the common pitfalls that I'm talking about. Often it's the process that matters that I couldn't tell from the product at the end by just looking at the pavement at the end. I wouldn't be able to tell these things. And then finally, because many of you work on federal projects and stuff like that, and we don't just bid one road, bid me a price for one road like you would a driveway or something like that. We're paying by the ton, we're paying by different quantities. The inspector's also there to verify the quantity of the product so that the pavement doesn't end up being put somewhere else. Okay. You're also there to identify reasons for some deficiency or defect, something that happens, right? And I'll harp on this a little bit later because in my years of doing this, and although my years are not close to some in this room that have been doing it for much longer, I have rarely seen being on a paving site for more than 4 hours and something didn't happen. May not be the fault of the contractor, but something seems to always happen. All right. And then the other reason why it's good to have an inspector on site is to have an owner's representative there. So when something does happen, all right, there's someone who can make a decision. Okay, this is how we're going to handle this. We're coming up on this intersection. We have to do X, Y, Z. Traffic's a mess. There's someone there that can make a decision, all right, about how we're going to handle this. So, inspection and quality assurance, we have QC and agency people. I know talking to Sharon earlier, we have some contractors, mostly agency inspection people, all right? But QC, contractor representatives, the contractor doing the work, also has inspection roles there for quality control, all right? So their production and field staff are always doing inspections. It may not be as formal as the owner, okay? It's not as formal, but someone at the plant is looking at piles, looking at the plant, making sure things are running consistently. So prior to production or placement, during production and placement, and then after. And if we have these eyes, let's use them. For the owners or the people representing the owners, all right, you're conducting inspections. And what are you looking at? You're monitoring the contractor, all right, who's doing contract quality control. I view that role as a service. You're paying for it. So monitor that, review acceptance tests, the things that I'm doing as the owner to see how much to pay for this, right? Okay, what is the quality level of this so that I can pay for it? And then monitor production and construction activities. And then I find formal inspection reporting should be provided at least once daily for every major operation, right? So what are some of the best practices? Again, I'll throw out there for inspection, no matter what you're looking at, even if you're looking at something stupid like concrete. All right. I guess recording, you're going to get all my bad jokes on the recording forever, but break it down into observe, document, communicate. Okay. So observe, you're there. Okay. You're being compensated to be there, to be present, to be there to watch for things because you know what you're looking at. So that includes the material itself. That includes the process by which the material is being placed, and then the results at the end. Okay. And as an owner, you're comparing that to my specification requirements. The spec is what I expect out of the contractor, right? You're also there to document. I find observe, most inspectors do. Document, communicate, right? These two is where maybe sometimes we fall down a little bit, generally as an industry, right? So document. What I mean by document is objective facts, time, temperatures, quantities, locations. Where am I on the road? And to tell my colleague, my ex-colleague at Federal Highway used to say, tell the story of what happened that day, not the end result. As an inspector document, it's not everything ended up good. And I've said this many times. When I was at Maine DOT, this a lot of what I did was, going to places with issues. And the first thing I do is look at the inspection documentation from that day. Hey, we're having these segregation issues, et cetera, et cetera. I'd go and look at the paving reports from our inspectors, right? And if I had $1 for every time that it read like a Disney story, okay, that the sun was shining, it was 75 degrees, bluebirds were singing, and paving went great. We had no issues, period, done. Like I said, I have not been on site on a paving job for 4 hours and nothing happened. All right. No one from the traveling public drove over the uncompacted mat and made a mess. All right. Or unfortunately, we didn't have a close call with traffic control. All right. Someone that didn't see the flagger. All right. Or a time when the roller ran out of water and the rolling operation had to catch up a little bit. Okay. Or we ran out of trucks. Again, understand you're using windrow paving, that may be less of an issue, but we ran out of trucks. Okay. Something invariably happens. It may not be a problem. It may not be something that I have to reject or remove or something along those lines, but it still happened. So that's the difference between good documentation and bad documentation. My opinion is that you tell the story of what happened. It doesn't matter whether it even got resolved. Okay. So an example would be, we'll talk about some things later about, visual uniformity of the mat. Let's say you're getting a streak in there for a while, right? Okay, you're getting a streak in the mat. You as an inspector bring it up to the contractor. They say, yeah, I see it. I'm on it. I'm making this slight tweak in the screed, etc. After a couple loads, it goes away. Or after, a couple 100 feet, it goes away. Do you document that? Absolutely. It happened. Right? It's not an issue. I don't need to elevate it to someone else to say, oh, we got this problem, whatever. But it still happened. Document what happened. We had this issue from station, da 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 da. They made an adjustment. It's now good. That's good documentation. And then, given that example that I just had, communicating. As an inspector, you are there to not just be a body, right? Because otherwise, they'll find a way to AI some drones or whatever and just take video. All right. Here is what I see. Here is my expectation, which is the specification. Here's what I need. And to communicate to the contractor, right? The contractor wants that. They don't want somebody on site that's not going to be able to make decisions or not communicate. Unfortunately, again, I'm going to pull on many stories from my Maine DOT time. I have shown up to projects that had awful end load segregation. All right, awful segregation. And I talked to the inspector. In this case, they documented everything. Well, yeah, the segregation started about a mile back. Did you tell the contractor that that wasn't acceptable? Right? We need to do something about this. No, they'll see it when I get my paving report. Well, why are you there? Tell the contractor, right? Talk to the contractor. Don't ignore each other, right? Be proactive, especially while you're paving, right? What I like to tell people is take your bid price, right? Take your bid price for mixed ton and how much money is being placed every single hour, right? What's the value of that is going down? We want to be proactive and fix stuff while we can, right? We are limited once it's laid, right? But we can still make adjustments so it doesn't continue all day, all right? So observe, document, communicate back to the contractor, especially for you agency inspection folks. So I took this picture a number of years ago. You see an issue, all right? I'm seeing an issue that I don't like, I don't believe meets my specification, all right? What are the first 3 things you're going to do? Any thoughts? Again, chat, come off mute if you're so brave. All right. But you can put some in the chat. Let's see you see this. All right. Which I'm going to go out on a limb, say wouldn't be accepted. We got some pretty non-uniform texture. Number one, I've got cascaded mix all over the mat. If you're an inspector on a job, you see this, what are you going to do? Take a picture, call paving foreman, discuss the issue immediately. All right. I like those. All right. So when I thought about this, and you can keep adding in there, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Josh. Number one, notify someone. I see something, right? Let's call the foreman. All right. Let's call the foreman, someone who's in charge. If they're not there, woohoo. You see this, right? This is an issue. Right? So I'm going to notify somebody first, right? Why is that first? Because I'm still paving. This paver was still going. It was still laying down stuff I didn't like, right? So let's do that first. Number two, I like the picture and document time and location. Now that I've notified somebody that's an issue, let's start to document it. When is it? What's the location? What's the issue? Some photos, all right, etc. Okay. And then the last one that I'd say, that isn't necessarily in the response I have, but excellent, Don. I like that as well. All right. Provide an expectation for corrective action. All right. I told you it's an issue. I have now done my job and documented. So again, what Don said, take a picture, record the station, document diary. To me, that's all that documentation, right? My only argument would be I'd let the paving foreman know first, because I can still document after, right? I'd do that first. But the last one is I need an expectation for corrective action. Now, I don't know how everyone does this or how this is expected to do. I know what teaching I had for what in my time was if we had something that was really bad like this, I often got the explanation, I need to run to fix it. All right. A paver doesn't just fix like that, right? Hopefully we all know that I can't make an adjustment on a paver and it happens in the next 3 feet. It takes multiple kind of lengths of the paver to work out issues. All right. Depending on what it is, especially if it's thickness or grade, something along those lines, it needs that time. But we also don't want to continue laying mix that isn't meeting spec over time. All right. Okay. So we don't want to let this go on forever. All right. Okay. Tim says, tell the screed operator, probably yell at the operator to stop, probably pick up, box blade it out, set it back in, get back to paving. All right, talk to, again, yeah, maybe you don't go to the foreman. Maybe it's someone that's right there on site, especially if the foreman's not right there. All right. But to me, if it was something that was real bad, I'd say, I'll give you 5 loads to figure this out. All right. Otherwise, we got to stop. If the contractor was asking to go forward. Now, if the contractor wants to stop, then they stop. Right. But to me, it can't be a forever thing. Right? Of, well, yeah, you figure it out eventually. No, at a certain point, we're going to stop this. Right? And that depends on what it is, right? How bad the issue is. But I think if I see an issue, I'm doing 3 things here. And that's, again, notify somebody. Doesn't help anybody if the contractor doesn't know. Document it, as I already said. And then an expectation for what's going to happen as the owner, if this is the owner. All right. Excellent. Thank you very much, Tim, Don, Dustin, Josh, Tom. Appreciate you all kind of weighing in. So that's my spiel about inspection as in general. Now I want to get into some specific areas and, again, tacking, placement, compaction, and I'm going to focus on the areas where I think we've seen the most issues. All right. So have some North Dakota pictures here. All right. I know they're North Dakota because, again, I'm from the Northeast. I see absolutely no trees. All right. Different for me. All right. But different parts of the country. And what do we see with tack applications? Now, I do like to hit this relatively hard so that everyone understands why we often teach and are a pain about tack coats. All right, so what is a tack? Again, everyone here should know this. We're going to spray some asphalt, essentially glue, in between different overlays. All right. Well, Why do we do that? All right. If we kind of back up, and I'm going to compare to that white stuff concrete pavements. Concrete pavements are laid or placed generally in one big lift, right? One 8-inch slab, 9-inch slab, 10-inch slab, whatever it is. It's all one uniform material all placed at the same time. We don't do that with asphalt. If we have a 10-inch asphalt pavement, all right, over some aggregate base, we don't often do that in one lift. We may not even do the 4 inches in one lift, right? We're going to break that down into multiple lifts. Well, why do we do that? Well, for constructability reasons. Or we often use different mixes to save money where we can or to achieve some amount of performance. But we call our asphalt pavements flexible pavements because we want them to be flexible. The thing we need is that for all the layers to work together as one system, they need to be bonded, right? So this is where I show a screenshot from an excellent YouTube video that Marshall Kleinfelder did when he was at the Maryland Asphalt Pavement Association. He just took layers of plywood, right? Different layers of plywood, all right? Just laid them on top of each other, right? In between these sawhorses, didn't glue them. Put a 60-pound weight on it and measured the deflection down. All right, very simple, and had over a 1/2-inch deflection in the middle when I put a load right in the middle. Okay, this is your asphalt pavement with no bonding in between them. Right, if it's not bonded to each other, those layers will slip past each other. Instead of taking the load from the truck and passing it from the surface to the intermediate to the base to the aggregate. All right, so they slip. When he took these same sheets of plywood and just put regular wood glue, right, not the super duper stuff, right, regular wood glue, and glued them together, all right, what happened? And anyone that's a carpenter or hasn't done any work around it is going to understand. They all acted as one structure, as one big thing, right? And so when he put 160 pounds on, so more than double, almost triple the load, it had less than a 1/4-inch deflection. So almost triple the load, half the deflection. And why does the deflection matter? That's because I didn't get my prop. All right. Cracking and all our distress comes from bending this. Bend it, bend it, bend it, bend it millions of times. And that's how we get cracking. All right. That's why tack coats matter. We need these things to be glued together because that's how we design them. If they don't get glued together, then we have issues. We also have issues like this, a surface that doesn't get bonded to what's beneath, and it blows up, right? It's a small cost. It's such an overlooked item. As an industry, we need to kind of do better. And that's something that I can't talk about, something that I can't tell from the final pavement. I can't go to a pavement that was paved yesterday and figure out whether it was tacked well, right? No idea, right? I got to be there. I got to be an inspector and then we'll see that. So just a reminder of terminology. I think you're going to get all these slides that when we are using emulsion, tack emulsions, we have undiluted and diluted emulsions. What is an emulsion? An emulsion is the brown liquid or whatever it is. And what is it made of? Asphalt and water and agents that emulsify it. Why do we use emulsions? It allows us to spray asphalt at lower temperatures and also put a small amount on kind of well. The equipment doesn't do well, our sprayers, etc., when it's a small amount. It allows us to spray more, work it easier, and what happens is the water and all of these agents disappear. They evaporate. So I'm left with just the asphalt glue on an existing surface. So this is an undiluted emulsion. If I dilute an emulsion, which means just add water to it, right? If I add water to this 65% asphalt emulsion, now look how much asphalt is in it. I'm going to be honest, Derek, opinion alert. Put the warning up. I hate diluted emulsions. It makes it very confusing because what it changes is the amount of asphalt in this liquid. So when this is sprayed, I don't know how much asphalt is in it. This water and these agents do nothing for me, do nothing for performance. It's all about getting it on the road. And I understand that it's there for a reason. It makes it more sprayable, etc. But When I don't know how much asphalt, that's the residual asphalt. That's actually the glue. The rest of this stuff doesn't give me any gluing, doesn't help my performance whatsoever. So when I dilute an emulsion, it makes this an unknown, right? I don't know it as well. If it's an undiluted emulsion, at least I know where it stands. So what is going on when I spray tack? Again, for those of you that have done this a long time, all right, I'm going to spray the tack, right? Okay, I'm going to spray it. The water, the agents, and the asphalt is going to be there. It's going to look brown. Eventually, what's going to happen is the asphalt is kind of migrate down to the bottom of the tack and get on top of the surface. The water and the surfacting agents are going to come up, right? That's tack coat break. The moment when the water separates enough from the asphalt and it shows that color change, right? All right, from brown to black. So then eventually when it's set, all the water and agents are gone. So it's just the asphalt that's left. Okay. Some people call this completely broken. This is all a chemical process, actually. All right. Where there's a pH change, there's evaporation of the water. Okay. So there's a lot of things that affect this. Again, I would seem to get an argument here, but we want the tack to break. We want it to break before paving over it. All right. It kind of, if you will, the asphalt and the water separates out of it, right? So that when I do pave over it, that water will flash off. It doesn't flash off as well, all right, when I spray just the tack and pave right over it, okay? It hasn't done that separation, if you will. How do we, or this is kind of a written in the positive tone, but I do have to admit I am from the Northeast. I'm from outside Boston. I've been accused of having a somewhat pessimistic view on a number of things. So these slides are written in a positive view. What are the key factors? The Boston guy in me wants to say, here's what's going to get screwed up. All right, here's what goes wrong with tack. So condition, the amount of tack we use, proper operation or distribution, getting it to break, and then pick up, the one that I think we fight the most in a lot of areas. Maybe a little bit easier because you guys are windrow paving, all right, that maybe you don't run into that quite as much, all right, but we'll see. So condition of the existing pavement. These are two different pavements, right? Two different pavement surfaces. The demand for tack is going to be different on these, all right? One needs more than the other, right? Same thing goes if I were painting or staining a deck, right? If it's a brand new deck, right, and I'm going to go and stain it versus a deck that has been out there, weathered for years and years, the amount of stain that I would need to get the same finished product, if you will, is going to be different, right? There's different surface areas. The amount it kind of soaks in, if you will, is different. We should use different tack applications on these two different surfaces, right? And think about that and make sure we're putting enough glue that's actually going to matter and get me the stick I want. And that gets into the application rate. Okay, we want the application rate to be fine and enough for the surface that I'm spraying. Here's an example that's not. Okay, this is a picture I took from earlier. This is like lightly misting, all right? This is a very aggressive surface texture, and this is just lightly misting the surface, not enough. And that matters to residual binder content. How much I'm spraying is not what I actually care about, right? Because what I spray doesn't matter. What matters is how much asphalt is left. That's what actually matters. So I got to be careful that my application rate, I know what I'm spraying so I can figure out what my residual binder content is. We often find some agencies have actually gone to residual binder content as their spec. That can be hard, depends on if you allow dilution, but that's really what I want to know. So keep that in mind as an inspector. Then I can spray it just fine, okay? Maybe I put the right amount on, but what if my coverage isn't uniform, right? What if I got areas that just aren't covered? I'm not like right here, all right? Right in this mess. I got no tack there. So are we getting uniform and adequate coverage? So I might be spraying enough, but is it uniform all the way across, right? Then, is the emulsion breaking and setting before I pave? Are we allowing it to break? All right, another example, not the best application. All right, we don't want to pave over this until it has turned color. Right, what are the things that are going to affect that? Humidity, whether the sun is out or not, wind, all those things are going to affect that. We pave in a lot of times when it's hard to get the tack to break. Right, I'm not going to say it's never happened where people have paved over unbroken tack. All right, but we want it to break before paving over. And then the bane of many people's existence, tack pickup. You spray it and it just doesn't stay. Right, doesn't stick to the underlying surface. So people say, oh, great, you paid for that tack. It's being tracked all the way off the project. You know, I love the jokes of, oh, the town over here is going to love the seal you put on their road from the tack that you just picked up, right? It does help if the surface is clean. All right, that's where mill and fills. Getting a clean surface is very important often because you want a clean surface in order to get this tack to hopefully stick. You can change the materials. That's often a specification issue, but you don't want to see it picked. So successful tack coats, we want uniform, complete, and adequate coverage where we can. Okay. This is a picture where if you look at the milled surface for too long, you'll give yourself a headache. But I use this a lot as a good, all right, tack that is broken. All right, I'm ready to pave over it, hasn't tracked anywhere. This can be hard to do, but it is important to continue to look at.